Whispers Beneath Cold Earth, Part 1. The Gravedigger's Apprentice, New England, 1792. The cemetery lay like a wound on the hillside, a field of lichen-eaten stones arranged in no sensible order, some leaning like drunkards, others half swallowed by the earth. Trees bent inward toward it, as if compelled to watch, but too afraid to step closer. The people of Dunstable Hollow rarely spoke of it, and never named it aloud, except in whispers, the sleeping yard. Isaiah Bell had never believed in ghosts. Not before his parents' deaths. Not before the Reverend pulled him aside after the funeral and, instead of placing him in the care of the church or a nearby farmstead, walked him to the edge of the graveyard and handed him to a man who did not smile. "This is Silas Mott," the Reverend had said. "He's the keeper of the yard. He'll feed you, teach you a trade, mind your manners." Silas was pale-eyed, sharp-nosed, with a limp in his right leg and dirt always beneath his nails. His home was a squat stone cottage with no chimney, tucked into the trees like something trying not to be found. He greeted Isaiah with a nod, and not a single word, before turning and walking back toward the cemetery. The boy had followed, suitcase in hand, with a heart full of dread. That first night, Isaiah barely slept. The wind outside his window moaned low, and he thought he heard something scratching beneath the floorboards. But it wasn't till morning, when Silas placed a tin bowl of oats before him and finally spoke, that the unease rooted deeper. "Every grave," Silas said, "has a voice. Some you hear in dreams, others you hear only when you dig." Isaiah stared at him. "Do I need to answer them?" he asked. Silas looked out the window toward the graveyard and replied, "Only the polite ones." The days that followed were a blur of cold mornings, harder soil, and endless digging. Graves were shallow things in Dunstable Hollow, barely 4 feet down, though Silas insisted on 6 for every burial. "The earth tries to give them back," he muttered more than once. Isaiah was taught to use a copper rod, tapping the ground to listen for the telltale hollowness that meant a casket lay below. He learned to distinguish between child graves and those of the unblessed, who lay under plain stones or none at all. He learned, too, not to ask about the western edge of the yard. There, beyond a twisted iron gate sealed with rust, stood a single black stone that bore no name, only a symbol, a crescent moon pierced by a spiral. He'd seen it once during a storm and felt his breath catch in his throat. Something about it was wrong, not merely eerie or old, but fundamentally alien. "Don't go past the gate," Silas warned him. "She's still listening." Isaiah didn't ask who she was. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. But dreams, of course, paid no heed to rusted gates. That night, Isaiah saw her. A woman clad in tattered black stood in the mist that smelled of myrrh and rot. Her hair was long and tangled with frost, her eyes dark pools without end. She did not speak, but her mouth moved. And though no sound came, he heard the words in his marrow. "I remember the weight of the stone. I remember the nails. I remember being named, and then forgotten." He woke with a scream. His hands were streaked with dirt. Over the next days, strange things occurred. A row of headstones rearranged themselves overnight. The well behind the cottage began to bubble without wind. He found a bird, freshly dead, its wings plucked clean, placed neatly on his pillow. And always, that stone on the western edge seemed just a bit closer than the day before. Isaiah finally asked, "Who is she?" Silas sighed, long and dry. She was never buried in the Christian way. Her name was struck from the records. Not for sin, but for fear. Fear of what? Fear that she'd come back if we remembered her. That night, Silas drank himself into a stupor and locked his door. Isaiah wandered to the gate. The black stone shimmered faintly in the moonlight. A fox yipped in the distance. The air was sharp with cold. He pushed open the gate. It groaned like a warning. At the foot of the grave, he saw something new. a small bundle of red twine, coiled like a heart, pulsing gently. When he touched it, images flashed across his mind. A woman burning on a pyre, her mouth open in silent scream, the villagers chanting with pitchforks raised. Then emptiness. He dug. 3 feet down, his shovel struck cloth. A sack. Inside, bones. Small, fragile. And beneath them, a parchment that read, "She was not buried. She was planted. Do not feed her name." The ground beneath him shifted. He turned and saw her. She was no longer mist, no longer memory. She stood real and whole, eyes like shattered obsidian, and she was smiling. "You're the one who listened," she said. "I'm so very hungry for remembrance." And with a breath like wind over dead leaves, she was gone. Silas found him in the morning, curled beside the open grave, lips moving silently. From that day forward, Isaiah never spoke again. But at night he dug, not for the dead, but for the forgotten. To be continued in Part 2, The Unmarked Wake.